right, coming back to you with This Week in AI Security for the week of the 18th of December, 2025. And I believe this is our last episode on the Modern Cyber Feed for 2025. I'll have a little bit of notes at the end of today's episode and some things to say, but we've got 3 stories to dive into as well as a couple of special items to discuss. First, we're going to talk about Orascape researchers finding an AI attack that sends travelers to scam call centers. And it's not, strictly speaking, only airline call centers, as the headline would indicate here, but effectively the net result of this is kind of the modern version of SEO poisoning. If you look at most search engines, and let's be honest, Google really dominates the search market share at this point. When you do a standard Google search these days, you get the AI summary results right at the top, and it kind of reduces, in theory, the time that you need to kind of go through those results and find the one that is right for you. So this AI summary can be useful in some circumstances. But what threat actors have figured out is that by planting enough false information, they're able to actually convince some of the search engine crawlers that are processing data with AI that they actually have the legitimate phone number for different call centers. So you might Google the call center for United Airlines and you get this AI summarized result, and that could have been planted. That number could have been planted. And it's actually kind of doubly dangerous because, in fact, in a lot of scam situations, one of the first items that's recommended is don't respond to the 800 number that's in the phishing email that you might get that looks pretty legitimate. No, instead, go out in Google and find the official customer support number. So this was a really unfortunately clever way to kind of manipulate it. And I liken it to kind of SEO poisoning that some listeners may be familiar with from way back in, let's say, the 2000s and 2010s, where you could do things like get enough links pointed at something. I think there was a famous example during the George W. Bush presidency of, utter failure, that keyword phrase pointing to George W. Bush. And if you Googled utter failure, that result came up first. And that was called kind of like link poisoning or SEO poisoning or what have you. And I think of this as kind of, AI poisoning, where the scale that we're working at is the entire internet, and the target customer is anybody who, or the target victim is anybody who Googles for that particular piece of information. So certainly something to watch out for, and definitely something that the likes of Google and Microsoft and other search engine providers are going to have to figure out a way to mitigate. Because if this kind of thing stands for a long time, that's going to be a really, really bad look. And it does threaten to bring, some kind of legal reaction or state level reaction against AI summarized search results. Moving on to the next story, similar or a related story around kind of the crawling of the web. Cloudflare has been kind of one of the first organizations to tell all customers who are using Cloudflare in front of their websites as, hey, do you want us to opt you out of AI crawlers? So that AI crawlers can't train their models on the data that's on your website, text, what have you. And the proposal from Creative Commons, and I think it's backed by a number of other organizations, is what if we say we don't want to prevent them from crawling, but we want them to pay for crawling? And then they can decide whether they want to pay the fine or the fee to crawl our website and train their model on it. And we can set the price. And we could set the price at, say, hey, maybe it's 10 cents for these pages, but maybe it's like $2 for this page that goes into the details about how we run a certain process or whatnot. And if it's worth that much to the AI engine to crawl, then maybe we're willing to make that trade-off. So it's a really interesting proposal. I don't know that it will go anywhere because it's the kind of thing that, to my somewhat jaded cybersecurity mind, sounds idealistically right, but unlikely to get broad kind of consensus support across the internet unless it's really backed by a consortium of the top players. Most notably, I would say the top LLM providers. If they don't go along with this system, I think it's probably unlikely to get too much momentum, but a really interesting thing, and it could provide a layer of kind of content protection. So moving on to the next story. This week, featured Chrome browser extension was caught intercepting millions of users' AI chats. The irony in this, for anybody who knows Firetail, we have a browser extension that does this, but it explicitly does this, and it tells you that it does it. The difference in this case is this was a VPN service, and the extension is called Urban VPN Proxy. And so you expect a VPN service to proxy your traffic, as the proxy in the name kind of suggests. And a VPN service, for those who are unfamiliar, it takes your IP address or your location, wherever you're calling from, and it kind of swaps it for one. It relays it via a third destination. So if I'm trying to visit something like Netflix from outside of the country, Netflix is going to see where I am and then kind of, give me the content appropriate for that geographic location, which could depend on any number of factors like licensing and whatnot. And the same is true, broadly speaking, for e-commerce sites. They might display different prices, different product availability, and it really goes on down the line. And this has been pretty widely studied. And so a lot of VPN services offer a way for you to kind of appear to be in a different location in order to gain access to a different set of services. And there are lots of legitimate use cases for VPNs. In fact, a lot of businesses use VPNs or require their employees to use VPN, especially while traveling, in order to, kind of relay their traffic through the corporate gateways, which might have security controls and policies implemented on them. What you don't expect out of a VPN is that it is reading your traffic, because that is almost explicitly against the policies and the purpose of a VPN. So this was a very popular extension. It was even featured with 6 million downloads in Google Chrome and 1.3 million installations on Microsoft Edge. We're talking about minimally 7.3 million users who have installed this and may have inadvertently had their messages intercepted. So kudos to the team over at Koi who picked this up and shared information about it, and some really, really great things. I will say, this area about, AI usage inside the browser, this is such a fast moving space. Last week we had a story about Gartner recommending the discontinued use of AI browsers. I think we're not done seeing stories in this area. There's going to be much more coming out over the next couple of months. All right. As I mentioned, this is kind of the last This Week in AI Security for the year. We'll be taking the rest of the year off for the holiday break. We really wish all of our listeners the best for themselves, their loved ones, their friends, their families, etc. But what I did want to highlight is, a little sneak peek at something that we'll have coming out in kind of, early or late Q1 of next year. Every year at Firetail, we release our This Year in AI Security. And that report will be coming out in Q1 of 2026 as well. One of the places that we track information, or that we kind of gather information, is on something called our AI Incident Tracker. So I thought it'd be fun for the final This Week in AI Security of the year to take our tracker, drop it into a Google spreadsheet, and then start asking Google Gemini some questions about it. So I didn't have a ton of time, so I only got a couple of high-level statistics from it, but I thought I would share them with you again as a teaser. We'll have much deeper analysis in our full report coming out in 2026, but I thought I would just, share a couple of quick stats. So first thing that I noted was that the rise in AI incidents, AI security incidents from 2024 to 2025 is pretty broad. And there's a general rule of thumb in cybersecurity that for every publicly disclosed incident, you have something like 10 that go undisclosed. So I usually think about, kind of measuring these not so much with the raw number that's there, which looks to be in the 80s, but more think of that as like, well, that's actually probably representative of 800 incidents across the industry over this year. But the crazier thing to me was just how big the jump was from 2024 to 2025. And we have a pretty complete data set from 2024. So it was really interesting to see just how 2025 was the year that AI-related security incidents, I think, started to become like a global problem. So that was one. And number two, one of the breakdowns that we always do in our analyses in our annual reports is kind of categorization, trying to understand what are the top risks and so on. And I thought it was really interesting, the OWASP LLM Top 10 has prompt injection as the number one risk, and that is definitely up there. But higher than that is sensitive information disclosure. And this is much more of the, organization made a mistake and their data accidentally leaked as a result of something that they did. So more kind of, the user error type of problem. And that outstrips prompt injection by about a third. And so when we broke down, that number of incidents of the year across 2025, and we looked for the type of vulnerability or the type of incident, sensitive information disclosure was number one, well ahead of prompt injection, but prompt injection was of the, kind of top malicious categories, not the human error categories, is number one. And we've talked about the risks of prompt injection a number of times. All right. I just want to take a moment to personally thank all of our listeners for their time, for their intention. If you have stories, please do submit them to us. We'll get them into the AI tracker. We might feature them on This Week in AI Security. And again, if there are guests who would like to join us on the Modern Cyber podcast, please reach out. If not, for myself and the whole Firetail team, we wish you and yours all the best of holidays wishes, and we will talk to you in 2026. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.